Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ice Cold Takes podcast. I'm your host, Joey DeMeglio, and the Rangers are fresh off of a thrilling come from behind double overtime victory over the Hurricanes in Game 2. Today, I'm joined by a special guest. He's a former first overall pick and 2007 All-Star for the Islanders and currently works on 98.7 ESPN Radio. Rick DiPietro, thanks so much for joining me. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. I guess I gotta start here with, working for the radio since I listen so often, but going from your playing career and then winding up at the radio station, how did that end up happening? How did you find yourself working for 98.7?
Lucky, to be honest. It was very lucky. When I finished up with the Islanders, I tried to make a, a quasi comeback, we'll call it. I went up to Canada, try to work on my body, get myself right, and then hopefully get a chance with somebody. End up in Charlotte with the Checkers. Didn't really work out well for me. Body kind of said enough is enough. And then I was sitting in the car one day talking with my father-in-law, and he said, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And I said, that's a that's a good question. I have no real idea what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And it just so happens at the time I was listening to ESPN radio, and a good friend of mine, Alan Hahn, who covered the Islanders for Newsday, was doing a show. And for whatever reason, because I don't normally listen to sports talk radio, just because I didn't probably want to hear the negativity that I assumed would be on it about me and my injuries and everything else. For whatever reason, it was on. They asked a hockey question, and I actually knew the answer, so I texted Alan the answer, and he brought it up and said, "Well, he's got a text from my buddy Rick," and he texted me back. He said, "I'm filling in. You should try this. I think you'll love it." And I was like, "There's no way. I'm not ready for that yet. I can't imagine like Rangers fans calling in and everything else." And he kept kind of insisting that I should try it. And I finally did. And we drove into the city. I filled in. We did a show, I think, from 7 to 10. And his tagline was, "We're going to keep doing it until they make us stop." And that turned into another show, and then another show, and another show. And eventually, um, special thank you to Justin Craig, because he actually was the one that believed that I could do it, um, gave us a show. And from that point on, it was Han and Humpty, and been doing it ever since.
Yeah, so would you say that your relationship with the media members as a player made you more interested in having a second career with the radio, or was that just, having that relationship with Alan Hahn that made it possible?
I think it was more my relationship with Alan Hahn. I don't know if I had the best relationship with the media necessarily. I wish I knew then what I know now, as far as how you handle the media, how important it is to get, your message kind of across through the media. Um, but it was really the friendship that started it. And then I already watch, I watch, the Jets religiously. I watch the Mets. Like, I love these teams. So to have the opportunity to just talk about sports that I love for 3 hours a day seemed like a no-brainer.
Mhm. So what are, like, the most memorable moments or stories you have working on the radio that you can share?
Cool. I got so many. It's been a long time. It doesn't. I was talking about this with my co-host Dave Rothenberg the other day. It's been a long time since I started doing this. Um, we just had a memorable Sunday. So Dave
Yeah.
and I were challenged in pickleball. So we played pickleball in Stanford at Pickleball America. It was us versus Anita Marks and Amani Toomer, and they talked lots of trash, lots of trash. Anita Marks mentioned that we could probably be pickled, which is get shut out. Little did they realize that my partner was a former tennis player, so we ended up dusting them up 3 games to none. So that was a pretty cool moment. And then I would say probably the bet I made with Alan. So when it was Han and Humpty, we made a bet. He's a Yankee fan. I'm a Mets fan, and he thought that the Yankees would have more regular season wins than us. And I said, "All right, let's bet on it." And the bet was whoever lost had to get the Han and Humpty tattoo, and then included in the tattoo would be either a Mets logo or a Yankees logo. So needless to say, I won, and now he has a Han and Humpty Mets tattoo on his arm.
That's pretty great. I saw the video of you and, Dave at pickleball. You guys were killing it. I mean, I don't know if about what you think, but I think your reaction time from your all those years playing goaltender really helped you with that.
I think it probably helped. Body doesn't feel quite as good as it used to, but we try to keep it kind of under promise, over deliver, not too not talk too much trash, and I think it was to our benefit.
Mm. One thing that I remember, this is a long time ago. I was in high school when this happened. When you and Alan and it might have been RJ who came up with the idea. You'll have to fill me in on that, but the It Takes Two rap with Dave Maloney, that was
Yeah, that was a
awesome.
good one. Yeah,
Was
that was a
that
good one.
whose idea was that?
That was Alan's. Alan's a big music guy, and as soon as he heard the Maloney sound, it kind of started, percolating in his head that this is gonna be something we could do. And then, I mean, RJ, who I get to work with every day, is a genius when it comes to stuff like that. I was lucky enough to have Ray Dinahan, who was one of our producers during Haunted Humpty, and he was kind of my. We would do a lot of songs, like we did a Deflategate song, we did, yeah, you name it, we kind of did it, and I would write the songs, and then I'd have Raymond record them and do the vocals on it. So it was actually pretty fun.
That was cool. I remember it came after a Rangers Islanders game. It was actually a really good game too. So I think my brother like recorded it and sent it to me. I have it saved, so it's great. If you set it as like your ringtone, man, that's awesome. I love that one so much.
Well,
Um,
Maloney's always good for some good sound.
yeah, yeah, for sure. He's just I talked to Don about it, but he's he's like the New York Ranger. Like he bleeds blue and because he was the captain and like that's his team. So having him work for the radio, be so passionate about it, like especially last night in such a thrilling game. Uh Rangers Nation just loves and adores the guy so much. So I'm glad he's still able to do it to this day.
Well, you want to hear the passion, right? I mean, you want the
Yeah.
person that's talking about it to feel how you feel about it, and also have the ability to give you kind of the insight into what's going on because he played. So he's the perfect guy to be doing it.
Mhm. Now moving into your career as a goaltender, where did you draw your influence from in becoming a goaltender?
That's a good question. It was the equipment. I hate
The
to even
equip
say it, but it was the equipment. I thought the goalie pads and the goalie helmet were really cool thing, and they could design your own mask and everything else. So that was the reason why I started doing it. And then I think that was when I was 4 years old, and then just kind of fell in love with it.
So do you, like, collect masks too? Because I know some players like Ovechkin collects sticks. Do you collect, like, goalie masks? Like, go online and try and buy some, like, old masks or bid on some?
No, I haven't bought anyone else's masks. I have all my masks, or at least everyone but my college one. For some reason, my BU mask got misplaced or stolen or whatever. So I don't have that one. But from my first mask, which was kind of a replica of Andy Moog's mask. I was in Boston, so Andy Moog was my favorite goalie. So he had the bear with the open mouth,
Mm.
and I love the concept. So I ended up, I don't know if I was playing for a Panthers team or whatever. So I had the panther with the open mouth, and that was the first one.
Yeah, that's cool. And you possessed a unique trait as a goalie. You caught right-handed. Did you see that as an advantage to throw opposing players off, or did it, like, not make a difference at all?
I think it was probably an advantage. For me, it was a disadvantage because back then when I was playing, they didn't make I couldn't get full right gloves. So I mean, there's pictures of me early on when I was playing with a catching glove on, and then a forwards glove on as my blocker because we couldn't you couldn't find full right stuff to fit me. So at that time, it was probably to my it was probably a negative thing. But I think looking back now, especially talking to some of the forwards that I played with, it's definitely a different look for them because they're not used to seeing it.
Mhm. Yeah, I've noticed that nowadays it's pretty rare. I could only think of 2 off the top of my head. I think is Logan Thompson and
Yeah, and
Charlie
Vimelka
Lindgren.
and Vimelka.
Vejmelka.
Yep.
Yeah, like those 3 there you go, there's 3 there. But it's not often you see a right-handed, goaltender. I think Vokoun was a righty
Yep, Vokoun,
goaltender as
Darren
well.
Pupa, Barrasso, um,
Yeah.
who else? Grant Fuhr was left those full right. There's not a lot of us. We got to stick
Mm.
together the full rights.
Yeah. And with your injury history, did you ever feel like you had to change your play style? Because I know that's a huge thing with how goalies play, whether it's the hybrid or the butterfly, being on your knees or stand up. Did that ever come into effect with your injury history?
I think I tried. I think every athlete every offseason tries to kind of find new ways to get better. I think probably the biggest change for me happened I don't remember what year it was. It was definitely after all the injuries, but I started working with Steve Allicat, and it's funny because I kind of came in on that tail end of more a hybrid athletic goalie where it was kind of um, out out above the top of your crease. And I wasn't a big guy. I mean, I was 6 feet, but out of the top of your crease, grew up loving Mike Richter and be more of an athlete to what you see now, where it's more deeper in your blue paint, big, technically sound. And when I started working with Steve, that was the one big thing he said to me. He's like, listen, I mean, you're making it too hard on yourself. You stay, there are certain areas of the ice where you want to be aggressive, and then there are other areas where, you give yourself a better chance to come across the ice. And for me at that time, having lost a couple steps because of the hips and especially my knee, it made perfect sense. Valley is, I mean, I'm sure you watch him on the pre and post stuff with the Rangers, but he is a goalie savant.
Yeah, the analytics stuff is always very refreshing to see, how specific that stuff is, but I was gonna ask, like, with those injuries, like, I imagine you were often frustrated dealing with them. What other feelings were going through your head, and how did you deal with those injuries? Like, what was the way to overcome that?
I didn't deal with it well. I think it depends on the injury because there were injuries. My hips. I had the All Star game where I kind of hurt the hip and had that fixed, and then the other hip fixed. The big one was my knee. I went to Colorado to get my hip done, Dr. Philippon, and during the course of getting my hip done, there's also a knee doctor out there that's supposed to be the best, and they looked at my knee and said, we'd like to, this fix your meniscus rather than give you a meniscectomy, which is it's a longer rehab, but for a goalie makes more sense because you're gonna have um, what they told me was more longevity. And what happened was it didn't heal properly. Played in an exhibition game um, in an attempt to start the season like an idiot and not take my time. Tried to play the third period, went down, fell backwards, and popped all the cartilage out of my knee on both sides. And that was probably the hardest one, just because usually, as a young athlete, um, you think you're invincible, right? You get hurt, go to the doctor, they give you an MRI. Here's what's wrong. We'll fix it. Rehab for this many months and you'll be back. Got the MRI. Doctor came in, and I'll never forget it. Um, Looked at me and said, "I don't think I can fix you." I was like, "Well, what do you mean you can't fix me?" He's like, "We can't, we can't replace your cartilage like you just did. You've done permanent damage to your knee." Um, so I mean, from that point is when it all kind of spiraled downhill. I had to go get a cartilage replacement on my one knee. Still had one side that was exposed. So that was kind of the beginning of the end of it.
What year was that? When did that happen?
I think I was
That was
28. I think I was probably 28,
okay.
but I never really told anybody. We kept that kind of hush hush that I had the replacement, and then as I was coming back from that, got a blood clot in my leg, so that was a problem. It was one thing after another. It wouldn't stop, and it was just the hardest thing for me was mentally. I felt like I was in a great place where I really understood the game, and there were things I knew I could do, but because my body was so broken down, it wouldn't do it. I'd be like, initial instinct, do this, and the body's like, no, there's no way, and kind of just I don't even know how to describe it. I think it's what most athletes feel like at the end, when they've had
Yeah.
a long run where their body's just not capable. What was toughest for me was I had just signed a long-term deal, had this whole plan in my head that, you're gonna play to your, I don't know what it would have been, 38 or 39. Hopefully I've won a Stanley Cup, retire, and then, either sell off in the sunset or work for the Islanders or whatever. And to have it kind of that all change at such a young age was tough.
Yeah, I imagine that was, pretty frustrating dealing with all of that. I mean, you had such promise. I mean, you had an all-star, appearance, and then I think I saw in here you were fine one of 8th in Vezina voting in, 2007, which is, a pretty big accomplishment there. You also played in the Olympics too, which is awesome, representing Team USA. Um, but, like, at the beginning of your career, I know he was only there for maybe like 2 seasons with the Islanders, and you were there with Peter Laviolette for only 10 games plus 1 playoff game in, 2002, 2003, I believe.
Yeah.
Um, what do you remember about working with Laviolette?
He was actually my Olympic coach too. I loved him. I loved him. He's given me this actually may be a good for later in the show. It was some of the best advice I had ever gotten as a as a player from a coach. I'll never forget when I got called up. I always had anyone that's watched me play. I don't know if you want to call it um, being overexcited or trying to do too much sometimes, but I like to handle the puck. I'd be out of the net, and all things that Coach Laviolette liked. But the thing he said to me, and it stuck with me for the rest of my career, was when you play a game, don't try to be the show, steal the show. Right? Like, don't go out there intending to be the show. If there's a moment that you have to steal the show, you can steal the show, but just go out, play your game, and then let all that other stuff kind of come to you. And I never forgot it. And it was something he said to me on a plane ride. I forget to which city, but it was great advice. And I wish he stayed longer. I think it was unfortunate for us that we lost him.
It's interesting you bring that up because it seems like he had this reputation of being Valakek described him as a barker kinda coach, like he would push you in practice and stuff like that. He's like an old school type of coach, but I remember in the beginning of this season, he pulled Lafreniere aside during practice before the first game, and he must have said something to him. Was that something and you're telling me now that he said something to you on a plane ride. Was that something that he often did with his players, where he would go kinda personal one-on-one? And is that like a unique trait of Laviolette's?
I don't know if it's unique. It's unique to really good coaches, and there's a reason why he's had the kind of success that he's had. Right? He's the Stanley Cup in Carolina, the success in Philly. I'm sure he would have had success with us if he was able to stick around. Um, that's why you have Michael Peck as their assistant coach. The relationship he formed with Pex when they were here on the island. I think any great coach lets guys know, especially Barkers, as Valley would call them. You got to create the personal relationship first. And once players recognize that you care about them, not just as hockey players, but as people, that's when you can have a different level of accountability. You can yell, you can correct. But for all the great coaches that I've played for, that's kind of been the real real thing that sticks out to me was they created the relationship first, and then that allowed them to coach us the way that they wanted to.
Mhm. Now, what Laviolette said to you about "Don't be the show, steal the show," that seems like it connects really well with you personally because you went first overall, right? And so that pressure of being the number 1 pick ever feel like it was too overwhelming to manage? Like, how did you deal with that?
It was tough. I mean, it really was. It was kind of a weird situation too, just because of I knew going into the draft, and my biggest problem looking back at it now was that the year I got drafted wasn't supposed to be my draft year. I was supposed to get drafted. My draft year was going to be the year after. I missed the cutoff date by like 4 or 5 days, where my birthday fell. So in order for me to get into the draft, where I was rated after the World Juniors, I think in like the top 3 picks, and it was a tough decision for me because I love BU and I was only there for my freshman year. Um, so I opted in, and because I opted in, I never had the opportunity. Like all my college eligibility for hockey was gone. So even if I was drafted and wasn't at that age probably ready to take that next step, I had no chance to come back to college. So um, I like the idea of the Islanders. Never thought first overall would be something that was really going to happen because they had Luongo. I mean, they had Kevin Weeks and they had just drafted Luongo. I knew Tim Conley and had played with him when I was younger, and it was also close. It was close to Boston, so I was like, that would be. I mean, that'd be an ideal situation. I already know Timmy, and it's close to home. Never really thinking that there's a chance they're going to move on from Luongo, and of course they did end up drafting me first overall, which is even more pressure because you see how good you see how good Luongo turned out. Um, and then my age put me in a spot where I couldn't go to the AHL. They weren't sending me
Yeah.
to major junior, so I ended up in Chicago in the IHL, which is, I mean, great guys, but they're all, I mean, all older guys, all married, and I was this 19-year-old kid living by myself in an apartment, eating bags of salad and cans of tuna fish for dinner. Like it was just, I don't know if it was necessarily the best way to kind of transition from college to the pros.
Mhm. So if you had made that cutoff, you would have been able to stay at Boston for
And
and go
BU,
to
yeah, and
college?
go back and go back. Yeah, I
Okay,
could have
so
got
that
drafted
threw it.
and gone back to school.
Right, and you never got to finish school then?
No, which would have been perfect. I mean,
Yeah.
in a perfect world, I get drafted and then have the ability to go back to school for at least another year.
Yeah, that's crazy like now thinking about it, yeah, like Luongo was there. The Islanders had so many, like guys that were sort of in their prime, but maybe 1 year too late. Like they had Char and then Alexei Yashin too. And
Well,
they
we
made some
traded. I mean,
really,
that was
yeah,
part of that. I think if you ask Z, I think the biggest thing for Z was actually getting out of Long Island and getting traded to Ottawa. So that trade ended up being we traded Chara and the pick that turned into Jason Spezza, and
yeah.
we got Yash on the island.
Mm. Couple missed opportunities at some players there.
Right, but it turned
It
Chara
just
into Chara. I mean, it turned Chara into Hall of Famer.
yeah,
And he
it
goes to
did, yeah.
Ottawa. Like, I mean, he had an unbelievable guys run marathons weeks apart now. The animal.
Was the pairing in Ottawa, I think it was, Char Redden.
Yeah.
Redden was, became a Ranger and then unfortunate end to his career, but, I mean, those Ottawa teams in the mid-2000s were so dynamic, so like, offensively potent, like, they made some really good runs in the
Oh
playoffs
yeah.
there.
I mean, they had them, Alfredson. Those were good teams. Sean McEachran. Like those are good teams.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that for Chara was the biggest thing for him, though. Like
Mhm.
when he played my first year when I turned pro, played in Chicago for a couple months and then got called up. And Chara was on the team with us, but they would tell him just get the puck, get rid of it. And for him, it was get the puck and just throw it off the glass. He gets traded, goes and plays with Redden, and all of a sudden found this, this new part to his game, or was kind of like pushed into, hey, it's not just about getting the puck and firing it off the glass. Like you got to use your skill. You make that first pass, use your feet, and he turned himself into, I mean, one of the great defensemen.
Yeah, definitely going to be a Hall of Famer whenever eligibility, comes up. I'm not sure when he's eligible, but, uh, he should be in the Hall of Fame,
Yeah.
Char. But transitioning to today with guys like Alexi Lafreniere, Capo Caco, and if you wanna go to another sport like football, like with Zach Wilson or even Daniel Jones, like, I like to hear what you have to say about, being first overall and, like, the pressure those guys have. Do you think the pressure is more difficult for guys like Lafreniere, Kako to handle since they're expected to score points?
I think there was a ton of pressure for both of those guys, especially Lafreniere. I mean, first overall pick means for most people, it's you step in right away and you see production, which isn't or shouldn't be normally what people should expect. Because I think there's certain players in every sport that, regardless of situation, regardless of coaching staff, regardless of how dysfunctional a franchise is, they get drafted and they're just that good that they'll figure it out. Look at what Joe Burrow's done in Cincinnati, right? Cincinnati was a mess. They draft Joe Burrow and they're a destination now. Or what CJ Stroud did in Houston with the Texans, or what how good Connor McDavid is. Like Connor McDavid could flourish in on any team, no matter how poorly run. Bedard's that kind of player, but not every first overall pick's that kind of player. Like it shouldn't stop for an organization once they draft you with the first pick. It can't be, hey, we drafted you with the first overall pick, save us. There's still work to get. Work has to be done. You got to surround that player with the right guys around him. A good mix of young players and veteran players. Good coaching staff. Um, there are so many things that need to go into helping that kid reach his potential and you know become the player that you think he's going to become, which is why I used the first overall pick on him.
It was also unique too for Lafreniere because he wasn't drafted by a team that was tanking. He was drafted by a team that was pretty much in the thick of a playoff race. So, I don't know, what do you think? Like, how much of a factor did not having ice time his first few seasons play into,
I think
not
that's
being able
probably
to
some of it.
take that leap?
I think that's probably some of it. I mean, I think there was definitely a over the last couple of years, especially with Gallant, probably a level of frustration that from both of those guys that they weren't being given the same kind of opportunities to show what they're capable of doing. Um, you know, first power play minutes and stuff like that. But um, I could also make the argument that it's a good thing too to be on a team that isn't rebuilding, that doesn't stink, that you don't get used to losing, that you actually have talent around you. The most important thing for a lot of young players, myself included, is to have the right kind of veteran players around you because it makes all the difference. Because you don't, as good as you are in juniors and as good as you are in college, like you don't really know what it takes to be a good pro until you get the right kind of support system around you. And it's a long 82 game grind. And with all the travel and everything else, it is a tough road to navigate by yourself. And I think you're starting to see now, not so much Kako yet, and I don't know if it ever kind of clicks for Kako, but the player that Lafreniere has turned himself into now, it's not Connor McDavid or Bedard or first, a franchise altering first overall pick, but he's a damn good player, right?
Mhm.
And that's what you really want. Of course, everyone would want that kind of guy that completely transforms your organization, but Laffy's turned himself into a really good player.
Yeah, I mean, you watch hockey as much as anyone, probably more than any of the people at the radio station, but, like, what do you think between last season and this season was the turning point for Lafreniere? Because he really has made that jump this year.
Well, I think the biggest turning point for me was that kid line during the playoffs. That was when, like, I was kind of done, to be honest, with him and with Kako. And then all of a sudden, when they went on that run, and the kid line was, him, Heedle, and Kako were so good, and not only good, but like Laffy had like this real nasty edge to him, and I was like, whoa, like that's new, that's different. Like if he's going to play with that kind of edge, that's exactly what you need to kind of make your way through the playoffs. I thought, Panarin, same thing, right? Like that. I thought that hit Panarin had on Oshie was a huge deal. Like he's sick and tired of it. Like this team needs to win now. He realizes how physical the playoffs are, and he's going to step his game up to do that. But the other thing too is, and this, it's also who you play with, right? There are some guys that can carry a line. Like there's players that are McKinnon's, McDavid's, guys like that. You got one. His name. He's the bread man. It's Panarin. So now to be on a line with him and Trocheck, you want to talk about like a well put together line with Trocheck, Panarin, and Laffy. Because I love Trocheck. I think that's probably part of the bigger difference is getting a chance to play with those two guys.
Yeah, it's and he's on the right side too. Usually he's a natural left winger too, and that was a lot of fans had concern with if Lafreniere is gonna be able to, make that change. He looks like he has no problem with it at all. You brought up that he played with an edge, like, when he was on the kid line. What did you think of that hit he had in game 1 against the Washington Capitals, on Iorio? I thought that
Loved
was
it.
great. Yeah.
I loved it. You know what that does for a team too. I mean, it's like he's not someone known. Like he's not like you expect that from Rempe or bottom six guys to be physical like that. And when you see one of your, I mean, guys in your top six, your top line, come out and set the tone like that and forecheck that hard, that kind of tells you everything you need to know about where this team's mindset is at. I was saying this to Dave Rothenberg, my co-host, at the time because we had people calling when they had the brawl. They had the 5-on-5 when Rempe. And the funny part about that is Rebbe wasn't even the first one to fight, right? Like they
Yeah.
couldn't wait. I thought that was. I was telling Rangers fans because there were people upset, like that's not what hockey is about. I'm like, if you're a Rangers fan, you should love this because the way the Devils reacted, they didn't expect all five people to fight. The Rangers were all said, we're going to fight. We're not going to let Matt Rempe go out there by himself. They want to go. All of us are going. And I think that was kind of them recognizing that if they want to get where they want to go, which is to a Stanley Cup, they got to be willing to embrace that kind of level of physicality. So I thought that was a big moment, as like kind of like a coming together as a team moment for them.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you. And now you brought up Rempe, so I have to ask you about this. Like, how concerned would you be with a forward like that who he didn't play? I don't think he played a single shift from the second period, from the end of the second period to the end of to double overtime.
Yeah, he
How
played four
cons-
minutes.
yeah, how concerned would you be putting a guy like that in the lineup, uh, basically playing with 11 forwards for 60 plus minutes in a playoff game?
I think that when the time is right, probably if and when they finally lose a game, since they've started this playoffs off, 6-0, is when Lavi will make a decision and maybe make a change.
Yeah.
Especially with Heedle skating still. I mean, this isn't necessarily a series where you need him, right? They don't have. I mean, they're a physical team, but there's not. I mean, there's not a tough guy that you're worried about. I also think too, um, when you watch the way the referees kind of went after him last night after he bumped into Freddie Anderson, like it looks like they're looking to make a call on him. And the
Yeah.
last thing you want to do is have him take a bad penalty and you pay for it with the Canes in the power play. I honestly think the only reason they haven't made a change yet is because they just keep winning.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's I mean, you brought up the officiating. I kinda think it's a bit ridiculous, like, the way that they're handling that stuff. I mean, Svechnikov goes and runs, goes knee on knee, trips up with Shesterkin, and then Rempe goes in, bumps Anderson just a little bit, and then he gets like a whole spiel from Kelly Sutherland. Like, I don't know. I don't think that's fair.
And he got
I don't
hammered
know.
too.
Yeah.
Listen, the referees don't want to deal with that. Like the referees are trying to keep the peace, kind of keep things in order. And I think they look at him as someone that could disrupt that. Special Cups play was not. I mean, that was one of those situations where I didn't like it because that's a dangerous play, and
Yeah.
God forbid you guys lose Igor. But when the opposing goalie is as dialed in, as locked in as Igor is, you got to do something.
Yeah.
Sure, like you have to because I mean he's you want to talk about playing at a different level right now. Igor's game is so airtight right now. It's I was texting with the guys yesterday, watching him and Freddie go back and back and forth, making big save after big save. I was like, this is like goalie porn. Like it's that level of good. It was awesome.
Yeah, Anderson was dialed in last night. He made some great saves in overtime. I think Roslovic had a couple good chances. Zibanejad had one right in front of the net, and he gloved it. He's been good. Like, when Anderson's healthy, I don't know about you, but he's on his game. When he stays healthy, he, has that consistent flow to him. He could get into a rhythm, and he'd be a solid goaltender. A lot
No,
of
he's
people
good.
count him out.
No, I like him a lot. I mean, the thing for him is just kind of staying healthy, being available. I think probably the only goal that I would say he looks at and says to himself he should have was probably the Panarin goal in
Yeah.
game one
Yep.
that he let sneak through.
Yeah. What did you think of Lafreniere last night? The 2 goals plus that, I thought the first one, the shot was just incredible from that sharp angle, had a little bit of room to get it in, and man, he buried that thing.
Yeah, he's a super talented player. I think the biggest thing for me with him is, and kind of why I pointed to, the edge I saw him play with when they went with that kid line is you kind of know the areas you need to get to score goals in the playoffs. Like there'll be times when, your skill will take over and you have a pretty goal. You saw a rush by Panarin last night that was nasty. Um, and he's got the skill to do that. But you also got to realize too, like you got to get into the paint or near the paint, and that Fox made an unbelievable play, and Laffy was where he needed to be.
Yeah,
He was
yeah.
right on the doorstep, and he gets an easy tip. He actually almost had another one too when Anderson was on his back, and he had kind of an open net that he shot it over. But
Yeah.
um, that line, man, I'm telling you, like I give the coaching staff a ton of credit because that's a really well constructed line.
Yeah, Trocheck is having his best season. I think if Brian Boyle refers to him as the glue of the not just that line, but the team, and I think he's right about that because Trocheck really has a good blend, and when you go back and look at what the Rangers had before, they had Kopp, they had Strome, and, there was, they were trying to figure out who's gonna be that second line center. Are they gonna go out and make a trade for Scheifele, maybe Dylan Larkin, or are they gonna re-sign Strome or bring back Kopp? And really, I mean, that answer, Vincent Trocheck, I don't think people were satisfied with it as much as they are right now at first. Um, how do you view him in like this season, that contract, just overall your view on Trocheck?
Well, you're also talking about bigger names too. I think a lot of people react to, I mean, the names that they hear. You hear Dylan Larkin, you're like, "Ooh, that
Yeah.
sounds nice." Mark Scheifele, "Ooh, that sounds. I know him. That sounds nice." And then you hear Trocheck, and for me, he is the glue. I mean, he is the engine that runs that line because he's willing to do all the things that your more skilled players don't necessarily want to do or shouldn't have to do. Right? Like I would compare. Now, I don't know if I wouldn't say he's as skilled. He's not as fast, but that line reminds me of the line in Tampa with Kucherov and Point, right? Like Panarin, Kucherov, they're going to kind of do their own thing. Like you expect them to be, the finesse, guy making the nice plays. There's a reason why both of them had 100, why, Kucherov had 100 assists this year, but Point's the guy that's going to go in the corners first. He's going to get the puck. He's going to win you the faceoffs. Like that's what Trocheck's job on that line is to win you the faceoffs, go retrieve pucks, go to the dirty areas, screen the goalie, deflect pucks, get open. And that's the thing with him is he's got such a good hockey IQ. And when you play with a player that's as good as Panarin or McDavid or Kucherov, a lot of guys can't do it because they can't think the game the way that those great players can think the game. Like they're seeing things happen a step
Mm.
ahead. And if you can find a guy that kind of has that same kind of hockey IQ and is also willing to go to the areas that you're going to have to go to have success, it's going to work. And that's what Trocheck's been able to do for that line.
Yeah, it's almost like years in the making kind of thing where there's been this evolving narrative like about who's Panarin's right winger and who's Panarin's center. Like who are we gonna match Panarin with here? And it took a while. Like for a while it was Strome that was that chemistry, that butter to the bread. And now it's like undeniably it's Trocheck. So to see it pay all those years pay off is very satisfying as a fan. But I mean, to other teams, like maybe if you're a rebuilding team, if you're a fan of a rebuilding team, it's not going to happen right away. So there's going to be some growing pains here and there.
I mean, look what Hyman does with McDavid. You know what I mean? Hyman goes for over 50 this year because he's willing to do, I mean, all those things
Absolutely.
that you got to do. I think about too, if you're a Rangers fan, how Mika's having a great start to the playoffs, but that line 5-on-5 struggled for
Yeah.
pretty much the entire season. And the line that carried you 5-on-5 was the Trocheck Panarin line.
Yeah, I'm glad you noticed that about the Zibanejad line, in the regular season. There's also this narrative that the Rangers are, as a team, are power play merchants, which I mean, I guess it's fair, but they're not horrible at even strength. Like if you go back, I watched the team 2 years ago. Like if it weren't for Shesterkin, they would be a lottery team. Like that was not a good even strength team. They got their opportunities on the power play. They came through. This year it's definitely more balanced. What do you feel? How do you feel about that idea that the Rangers can only score on the power play and aren't a good even strength team? Do you think that that's a bogus narrative?
Well, I think the numbers would tell you that they're not a great 5-on-5 team. The Panarin line is one of the better 5-on-5 lines in the league. Um, I think from top to bottom, and not just the top two lines, but even the bottom two. There's some players that I really like. I really like Cooley. Cooley's a really good player. I trust putting VC on the ice. Bringing in Wenberg was a good move by Chris. Uh, they have some skill from top to bottom, and then on top of that, you have Adam Fox, on the point that's able to contribute offensively the way he is. Keandre Miller, I love him. Um, I think it was probably the easy narrative is look at how bad these guys have struggled 5-on-5. Mika just didn't have uh, a Mika kind of regular season. Because for me, like I would make the argument all the time whenever I was doing TV. I'm like, how come no one's talking about Mika for the Selkie? Like the guy's one of the best two-way. I mean, he's scoring over 40 and he's killing penalties. He's taking important faceoffs. He's one of the best two-way players in the
Mhm.
NHL, and no one's talking about him. So I mean, I was happy because I like him a lot. I was happy to see him get off to a really good start in the postseason.
Yeah, yeah, he's been the subject of a lot of criticism on Rangers Twitter, the Rangers fan nation community, so to speak. So yeah, seeing Zibanejad get off to the start too has been great. Roslovic has fit in pretty nicely. I thought he had a great first overtime period. I was predicting him to score really, the OT winner if the Rangers were going to score. But I'm very surprised Carolina didn't find a way to squeak through because I thought they were the better team last night.
Yeah, well, unfortunately for Carolina, you guys have the better goalie because Igor was lights out, and then you have taken a penalty. Like, say what you want. You can call me like that's like while people call it and say that Joel Embiid is a free throw merchant, a foul merchant. It's like, well, yeah, if it's working and he's going to get 15 points from the free throw line as an average, and he's going to average 35 a night. Call me whatever you want. If I have a power play that when we're down a goal is going to get me one when I need it, I'm good with it. I'm fine.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
that's what this
just don't.
power play is continually done.
Yeah, just don't take penalties against the Rangers. Yeah. That seems to be like the way to go here. Uh Carolina down 2-0 in the series now, heading back on they're going back home to
Yep.
Carolina. So, I mean, do you look at game 3 as a game that the Rangers have to win to really put them on their heels, or like that's a must win for Carolina, but can you say the same thing about the Rangers?
No, I don't think it's a must win for the Rangers. I think if the Rangers win game 3, this thing is as much respect as I have for Carolina, if they lose and go down 3-0, the series is for me
Mhm.
over. So, I mean, if you want to step on their throats, you win game 3. But it's amazing how I mean, game to game. I mean, you watch the Colorado game. Dallas is up 3-0. You're like, oh God, Dallas is gonna. What's Dallas is just gonna handle Colorado like that? You look up, and Colorado ends up winning that game.
Yeah.
Like last night, going to double overtime. Carolina finds some way to win that game. Well, all the momentum's now with Carolina, right? They did exactly what they
Mhm.
wanted to do. They would have split in New York, and now I think as you kind of take a step back from game 2, if you're Carolina, you're realizing, listen, we had over 100 shot attempts. We did most of the things that we wanted to do. We had a lead twice, right? You had the late goal in the first to take the lead, then you score another one, late one in the second, and the Rangers kept finding ways to fight back. And on top of that, we got to we got to somehow find a way to solve Igor Shesterkin. So I mean, even going home, they know they have their hands full with this Rangers
Mhm.
team.
Yeah, so you're looking at game 3 is like a must win for Carolina, and then game 4 is like that's the pivotal one there, right?
Yeah, Rangers got to split. Now, Rangers don't have to win game 3. I mean, Rangers want to go down there and just split. I mean, that's really the focus for them.
Mhm. Yeah,
Get back home 3-1.
interestingly, the last 3 playoff no, last 4, actually. Last 4 playoff series the Rangers have been involved in, they've gone up 2-0. And, so, 2 years ago, they blew it to Tampa Bay. Last year, they blew it to the Devils, and then they got the sweep going. They got the sweep on the Capitals this year.
I
So,
think it's a different team, though. I mean, you tell me, but I think it's a different team, and I think a lot of that starts
I
with.
agree.
I think Labby's a big part of that. I think that coaching staff's a big part of it.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah,
last year, that team was looking for answers from their coach, and the coach had none. I mean, his answer was, "Hey, we'll just put the lines in a blender and we'll start changing that up." That's not what they were looking for. They were trying to figure out how do we slow this Devils team down, and they had no answers for him. This coaching staff does. It's a different team. This Rangers team.
yeah, that analysis right there about Gallant, it was spot on. And which leads us to the ice cold take segment, which I was telling you about before we started recording. I have a little definition for it, so I read it every episode to remind the viewers at home that an ice cold take is an accurate statement backed by facts and observations that is solid in nature, similar to a block of ice, i.e., spot on claim. So
Oh.
similar to Point God. Rick, what's your ice cold take for today or this week?
Ice cold take for today or this week. Can this be opinion based?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, as a former goalie, and you watch probably as much hockey as I do, what's driving me crazy, and one of my biggest pet peeves now, is the reverse VH. Is goalies on their knees on off angle shots that don't need to be on their knees, that are getting beat over the shoulder for no reason. It is driving me crazy. If you're not big enough to do it and you can't cover the corners with your shoulders, don't do it. Please don't do it.
I've seen, like, a couple players try and shoot from the corner off the goalie's mask. Is that what you're referring to too?
Well,
Like,
you
they
see it
try and
almost every
bank it
game.
off the goal? Oh, yeah.
I see it almost every game. It happened to Bobrovsky the other night where he was deep on his goal line and it down and it beats him over the shoulder. It happened to Varlamov in the Carolina series where he's down early for no reason, an off angle shot beats him high. It's just I don't know. There's an element of, and it's why I like Igor a lot. There's a lack of athleticism sometimes at that position that drives me crazy. I love the fact that you can be technically sound and be able to do RVH and all these different things that technically you need to do now, but there also has to be some athleticism involved with the position, and I think they forget that sometimes.
You're really trying to save the goalie community from getting scored on in the playoffs with the Michigan.
Oh, dude, I can't even. I'm so happy that the Michigan wasn't a big thing when I played because I probably would have been kicked out of plenty of games trying to cross check and high stick people for that.
What was it the Islanders goalie that did the stick swing, or was it an Oilers? I can't remember, on Gretzky,
That was Billy
a long
Smith.
that was Billy Smith. Yeah,
Billy
yeah.
Smith was my goalie coach. I'm glad you brought that up. Billy Smith was my goalie coach, and he was so one of the days of practice, he wanted to work on plays around the net. So the drill was we had goalie and net, and then we had forwards in both corners. So whistle would blow, forward would take it out of the one corner, and he'd either cut in front of the net or he'd try to wrap it in on you. So guy comes in, takes it across the net. I kind of slide over and throw like a half a poke check, right, just so he can't wrap it in. And Billy stops the drill, and he's like, "What the hell are you doing?" I'm like, "What do you mean? What am I doing?" I was like, I went post to post, came down, little poke check." He goes, "That's not how you poke check." I was like, "How do I poke check then?" "Let me show you." Grabs my stick. Now this is with no mask, nothing. This is players' gloves, skates, and my stick. Blows the whistle. God, the poor forward comes skating around the net, and Billy goes post to post and takes his stick and swings it as hard as he can at his hands. He's like, "That's how you poke check." I was like, "No, I think that's a slash." He's like, "I'll tell you what, that guy's not gonna try to wrap a puck around on you again." I was like, "All right, I guess that's what we're doing."
Take the 2 minutes, and he'll never do that again.
All right, set the tone.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I love it. That's a great story. I'll give my ice cold take. I think you guys on 98.7 need to come up with a hockey show. This, I guess you could take this as my pitch. You could bring this to Justin Craig, or if he's watching this, he could give me his 2 cents on this. But I think you, Don, and Alan Hahn have to do a show called The Puck Drop. Be called The Puck Drop with Don Hahn and Humpty. On Saturdays in Canada, that's like Sundays in America. Like that's when you could have a show like that. Figure out a time when to do it. You could do it in the afternoon, at night. All you have to do is just to start, see if people will listen to it. 1 hour, 1 hour. Just give it an opportunity, and I think people will appreciate the sport of hockey, people talking about it, because I mean, this year alone, I don't think I've ever heard as much radio coverage as I have about hockey, from the Stadium Series to the Rempe Brawl, the 5-on-5 brawl, to the Knicks and the Rangers going toe to toe at Madison Square Garden with victories, and hearing you guys talk about it every morning. Uh, Anthony Pusick could produce the show. You could have RJ on. Ray knows his hockey. He does the pre and post game stuff with the Rangers. I think it's a great idea. I think you guys should try it. I don't know what you would do with one of the other time slots on there, but I would love to see like 1 hour just to start. You guys talk about hockey, just hockey nonstop.
I like it. I like it. It's a pretty good idea. Well, listen, you got the right person to run that by. Justin's the guy to talk to.
I got to
People
clip
want
that.
hockey. Listen, here's the problem: is there are a lot of people that want hockey. Unfortunately, for me and Don and the people that love talking hockey, 82 game regular season, we barely, unless there's a big moment, like you mentioned, the two moments, the Stadium Series where Rempe fights Matt Martin, that was a big deal. The 5-on-5 brawl, that was a big deal. But other than that, it's Knicks, it's Yankees, it's Jets, it's Giants, so we don't get a chance. But and it's tough for me. I'm not gonna lie, it is tough for me because I get put in spots where I want to talk hockey as much as possible, and if the Islanders aren't playing, right, because we're out, I kind of need the Rangers to keep winning, because if the Rangers lose, we're done talking hockey. So the longer the Rangers play well and win, the more I get to talk hockey. As long as they don't win the Stanley Cup, because if they win the Stanley Cup, then I don't even know if I could show up to work.
Dave's gonna shove it in your face.
Oh,
Uh,
dude, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's funny too, because I always see you or hear you and Don always make, like, when you're talking about it, like a different sport, you'll make a comparison, like an off comparison to hockey. Oh, it's just like the Rangers did last night with Lafreniere, or something like that. Or you'll mention something with Patrick Waugh and how he coached the Islanders or something like that. But you'll make like that comparison if you're talking about football. Let's say it's Zach Wilson, for example, like this season when he had a terrible season. You make that comparison. Okay, former second overall pick. You compare it to like Kako with the Rangers right now and how he's not panning out. I always see you guys trying to make that you squeak that little comparison in there just to talk a little bit about hockey.
I want people to love it as much as I do. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the best. I mean, this is probably a little bit biased, but I mean, it has everything you want as a sports fan. Like all the things you complain about with the NBA, they don't take the regular season seriously. You got to pay guys, incentivize guys to play. It's not like that in the NHL. Guys want to play all these games.
Mhm.
Um, Toughness. It's eight. First of all, it's 82 games. Try to battle through 82 games. You got guys on the bench pulling their teeth out. Wait till the injury report after this playoffs comes out. This guy was playing with a broken ankle. Last year, he had, Matthew Tkachuk playing with a broken freaking sternum. He couldn't even get himself dressed. He's out there playing with a broken sternum. It's got the pace. It's got all of it. It's got everything. And
Yeah.
that's why I'm surprised more people. I think it's growing, and I think having it on ESPN has helped quite a bit. And what they're doing with it on TNT, but there's nothing better than the NHL playoffs. Nothing.
Yeah. As long as they fix the production from last night of the game, then
Oh,
we're
how about
fine.
that?
Oh man, that was like, I recently finished watching The Sopranos, and from what people said about it when it was on like cable, like on HBO, the ending of the show. Now I'm assuming you've seen The Sopranos, right? Okay, so
Oh
like
yeah,
the
yep.
ending, the very end, the last episode of the show, how it ended, how people were like, they thought that their cable went out. That's how I felt about when it cut to that Dallas game as the Rangers were rushing up the ice. Like,
On the
that's it.
power
I have to
play.
change. Yeah, on the power play. Like, I have to change my channel now. So it's like, this is ridiculous here. Like, I thought I was gonna have to like unplug the TV and plug it back in. Like, what is going on here?
That's funny. Yeah, that was tough. That was tough. God, can you imagine if Carolina had scored and the
Oh my
Rangers for
god.
the Rangers fans? You guys would have
They
lost it.
they had a chance too, like, I think
And two.
right before they cut, there was a 2-on-1, and, like, I'm freaking out. My dad and I are yelling, we're screaming at the TV, my mom is freaking out, we're all nervous.
That's great.
Yeah, man, like, as long as they fix that, we're good with that. I love the TNT broadcast, Lundqvist and Berube are good guys to have on there. Biz Nasty, of course, is, comedic relief there for those guys. But yeah, I mean, hockey with that show, that I just pitched, just throw it a bone, like, 1
All right.
hour, and I know, like, if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. That's it. I'll have my answer. But, I
All
mean,
right.
just
We'll
throw it
see.
a bone.
I
Yeah,
like the idea. It's a good idea.
yeah. Rick, I appreciate you coming on the show, though. We're gonna wrap this up here. Any last thoughts before I end the stream here?
No, no last thoughts. This was a pleasure. I know this is something we've been trying to do for a while, and I'm glad that we finally got the opportunity to do it. This is great.
Yeah. I hope Dave rubs it in your face when the Rangers win the Stanley Cup.
If that happens, you might not see me for a couple days.
Come on. I'm ending the stream right now.